The world now produces enough calories to feed more than 10 billion people, while the global population is closer to 8 billion. In the United States, food has become nearly 60% cheaper relative to income since the 1970s. Supermarkets run 24/7. Fast food costs less than fresh vegetables. A full meal packed with calories can cost just a few dollars. Yet at the same time, over 40% of adults are obese, and diabetes and heart disease have become routine. Calories have never been cheaper. Healthcare has never been more expensive. This isn't a personal failure. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed. A weekday evening, repeated millions of times across the world. In the United States, a family eats a frozen dinner that costs under $10. The meal delivers more than 1,200 calories. It takes less than 5 minutes to prepare. By comparison, a basic fresh-cooked meal costs nearly double and requires close to an hour. The choice feels practical, not careless. Later that night, prescription bottles sit on the counter. 1 in 3 American adults now lives with prediabetes. Nearly half are overweight or obese. The parents are in their early 40s. Their first diagnosis came before 40. This is no longer unusual. It is the statistical middle. In Mexico City, dinner comes from a convenience store. Packaged bread and a sugary drink cost less than bottled water. Mexico's per capita soda consumption exceeds 160 liters per year, among the highest in the world. Type 2 diabetes has become one of the country's leading causes of death. These numbers did not rise during food shortages. They rose as calories became cheaper. In South Korea, a single worker eats alone after a 12-hour shift. A microwave meal from a convenience store delivers most of the day's calories. Since the 1990s, obesity rates have doubled. The average time spent cooking per day has fallen below 30 minutes. Food adjusted to work schedules. Bodies adjusted later. In China, the change was faster. In the 1980s, diabetes affected less than 1% of adults. Today, more than 10% live with it, representing over 140 million people. The rise followed supermarket expansion, fast food growth, and delivery platforms. One generation bridged the gap. In the United Kingdom, ultra-processed foods now account for more than half of daily calorie intake. Childhood obesity rates have climbed steadily for decades. Parents are not ignorant. They are constrained by price, time, and availability. Across these places, the pattern holds. The meals are affordable. The routines are normal. The numbers move quietly. No one feels reckless. No one believes they are making a mistake. The system did not demand bad decisions. It made them unnecessary. This is not indulgence. It is exposure. Repeated daily, over years, across continents. And by the time illness appears, the environment that produced it already feels ordinary. The global food system now operates at a scale no civilization has ever managed before. Since the 1960s, agricultural output has more than doubled while population growth has slowed. Today, the world produces enough food energy to feed over 10 billion people every day. On paper, hunger should no longer exist. Scarcity, at least in calories, has already been solved. Yet the numbers tell a different story. As food production scaled up, diets did not become healthier. They became cheaper, more uniform, and more processed. In high-income countries, the share of household income spent on food has steadily fallen. In the United States, families once spent more than 20% of their income on food. Today, that number is closer to 10%. Similar declines appear across Europe, Japan, and South Korea. Calories became affordable. Variety became optional. At the same time, healthcare costs moved in the opposite direction. In the United States, healthcare spending now exceeds 18% of GDP. Type 2 diabetes alone costs hundreds of billions of dollars each year when medical treatment and lost productivity are combined. Cardiovascular disease remains the leading cause of death worldwide. These diseases did not rise during famine or food shortages. They expanded during an era of abundance. The pattern repeats globally. Countries that industrialized their food systems fastest saw the sharpest rise in diet-related disease. In the United Kingdom, ultra-processed foods now account for more than half of daily calorie intake. Childhood obesity rates have climbed steadily for decades. In Australia and Canada, similar trends appear, even as overall food access remains stable. In East Asia, the timeline is compressed. Japan once had some of the lowest obesity rates in the developed world. Traditional diets emphasized fish, vegetables, and fermented foods. As work hours lengthened and convenience became essential, packaged meals and ready-to-eat foods expanded. South Korea's obesity rate doubled within a generation. In China, the shift was even faster. Since the 1990s, obesity and diabetes rates have surged alongside urbanization, supermarket growth, and fast food penetration. China now has more people living with diabetes than any other country on Earth. In Latin America, the scale appears in consumption data. Mexico records among the highest per capita soda consumption rates in the world. Sugary drinks became cheaper and more accessible than bottled water in many regions. Diabetes rose rapidly and is now one of the country's leading causes of death. In Brazil, food exports reached record levels while domestic diets shifted toward ultra-processed products. Obesity rates more than doubled since the early 2000s. The region feeds global markets. Its population absorbs the health costs. In South Asia, the scale of the problem takes a different form. India still faces childhood undernutrition in many regions, but adult obesity and diabetes are rising at the same time. Early life calorie scarcity followed by later life calorie abundance creates fragile metabolic outcomes. The food system supplies energy without repairing early nutritional damage. The result is a population vulnerable to chronic disease even at lower body weights. Across Africa, urbanization accelerates the same pattern. Traditional diets based on grains, legumes, and local produce give way to imported packaged foods. Cities expand faster than fresh food infrastructure. Convenience wins by default. Obesity, hypertension, and micronutrient deficiencies rise together. Hunger does not disappear. It changes shape. Globally, non-communicable diseases now account for more than 70% of all deaths. The majority are linked to diet and lifestyle factors shaped by food availability, pricing, and time pressure. This shift did not unfold over centuries. It accelerated within 2 generations. The timing matters. It aligns precisely with the industrial scaling of food production, processing, and distribution. The economic logic behind this scale is consistent. Food systems are optimized for cost per calorie, shelf life, and transport efficiency. Crops that meet these criteria dominate global markets. Ingredients that can be refined, stored, and shipped cheaply become foundational. Fresh foods struggle to compete at scale without higher prices or waste. The market responds accordingly. Subsidies reinforce the imbalance. In many countries, government support flows toward commodity crops rather than diversified nutrition. These policies stabilize supply and keep prices low, but they also flood markets with ingredients designed for processing rather than direct consumption. The result is an environment saturated with cheap calories and limited by time. What appears as individual choice is often structural exposure. When the cheapest, fastest calories dominate shelves, consumption patterns stabilize around them. Education alone cannot override pricing, access, and work schedules. Behavior follows environment more reliably than information. This is the scale of the problem. Not isolated products. Not a handful of corporations. But a global system that succeeded in making calories abundant and affordable, while shifting the long-term costs elsewhere. The system reduced hunger. It also normalized chronic disease. From a distance, the numbers look contradictory. From inside the system, they are aligned. Food gets cheaper. Health gets more expensive. And the gap between those two curves continues to widen, quietly, across every region connected to the modern food economy. The paradox at the center of the global food system is simple. The cheaper calories become, the more expensive health gets. This isn't an accident. It's a direct outcome of how food is produced, priced, and moved across borders. Calories are cheapest when they come from crops that grow fast, yield high, and survive long supply chains. Corn, wheat, rice, sugar, and industrial oils dominate because they fit this equation perfectly. They can be grown at scale, harvested mechanically, stored for months, and shipped across continents without spoiling. Protein and fresh vegetables cannot compete on those terms. In the United States, corn is subsidized heavily, not because people need more corn on their plates, but but because it feeds livestock, fuels ethanol, and becomes the base ingredient for syrups, starches, and oils. A single acre of corn can generate thousands of calories at a fraction of the cost of fruits or vegetables. The market rewards that efficiency. The human body absorbs the side effects. In Brazil, soy production expanded rapidly to meet global demand for animal feed and processed food inputs. Forests were cleared to grow crops that don't feed local populations directly, but travel through international supply chains. The result is cheap meat and ultra-processed foods abroad, while domestic diets shift toward higher calorie, lower nutrient patterns. Obesity rates in Brazil have more than doubled since the early 2000s, even as food exports surged. In Mexico, the transition is visible at street level. Traditional diets based on beans, corn tortillas, and vegetables were once dominant. As trade liberalization increased and multinational food companies expanded distribution, sugary drinks and packaged snacks became cheaper and more accessible than clean water in some regions. Mexico now has one of the highest per capita soda consumption rates in the world, alongside soaring diabetes prevalence. The calories are affordable. The consequences are not. In the United Kingdom, ultra-processed foods account for more than half of daily calorie intake. These products are engineered to be consistent, hyper-palatable, and shelf-stable. They travel well. They sell fast. They reduce waste for retailers. Nutritional density is not part of the pricing equation. Health outcomes are externalized. Across East Asia, the same pattern follows urbanization. In South Korea and Japan, traditional diets once centered on fresh vegetables, fermented foods, and fish. As work hours lengthened and convenience became essential, packaged meals and fast food gained ground. In China, supermarket expansion and Western-style food chains coincided with a sharp rise in obesity and type 2 diabetes within a single generation. The shift happened too fast to be cultural. It was structural. In low- and middle-income countries, the paradox becomes even sharper. Undernutrition and obesity now coexist. In parts of India, children experience stunting early in life while adults develop metabolic disease later. Cheap calories fill stomachs without building resilient bodies. The food system delivers energy, not nourishment. This is where economics overrides biology. The global food system optimizes for three variables: cost per calorie, shelf life, and transport efficiency. Nutrients degrade. Freshness expires. Calories persist. Over time, the cheapest inputs dominate production, processing, and marketing. Governments reinforce this pattern through subsidies and trade policies. Commodity crops receive support because they stabilize markets and ensure supply. Diversified agriculture is riskier and more expensive. The result is a flood of inexpensive ingredients that can be recombined into thousands of products, all delivering energy at minimal cost. From a market perspective, the system works. Food insecurity caused by scarcity declines. Supply becomes predictable. Prices remain stable. From a biological perspective, the system drifts away from human needs. Bodies evolve for variability, fiber, micronutrients, and seasonal change. The modern food environment offers uniformity, refinement, and constant access. No central authority planned this outcome. No single corporation controls it fully. The paradox emerges from alignment. Farmers respond to subsidies. Companies respond to margins. Consumers respond to price and convenience. Each decision makes sense in isolation. Together, they produce a system where eating enough is easy, and staying healthy is statistically harder. This is why education alone fails. Information does not change environments. When the cheapest, fastest calories dominate shelves, behavior stabilizes around them. Not because people lack discipline, but because systems are stronger than intentions. The global food system did what it was built to do. It defeated scarcity by making calories cheap. It never promised to protect health. That contradiction sits at the core of the modern diet, replicated across continents, cultures, and income levels. The paradox is not that people eat poorly. It's that the system makes that outcome predictable. The modern food system doesn't look like a machine. It looks like choice. Shelves, brands, labels, promotions. But behind that surface sits a structure built to reward speed, volume, and predictability. It begins at the farm. In many countries, A small number of crops receive the majority of financial support. Corn in the United States, wheat in Europe, rice across Asia, soy in South America. These crops are subsidized not because they create healthy diets, but because they stabilize supply and reduce price volatility. Governments want calories to be abundant and cheap. Farmers respond by planting what pays. Over time, diversification disappears. Monoculture scales faster. A farmer growing corn on thousands of hectares can predict yield, lock in contracts, and mechanize labor. A farmer growing vegetables faces higher risk, shorter shelf life, and unstable prices. The market does not reward nutritional variety. It rewards output. Those crops don't stay on farms. They move into processing. This is where calories are stripped down and rebuilt. Corn becomes syrup, starch, oil. Wheat becomes refined flour. Soy becomes protein isolate and industrial oil. Processing extends shelf life from days to months, sometimes years. It reduces spoilage. It standardizes taste. It lowers cost per unit. In the United States, over 70% of packaged foods contain corn-derived ingredients in some form. In Europe, refined wheat and seed oils dominate processed products. In Brazil and Argentina, soy travels thousands of kilometers before appearing as meat, snack food, or export commodity. Consumers rarely see these transformations. They see the final product, not the supply chain. Next comes manufacturing. Large food corporations operate at scales smaller producers cannot match. They buy ingredients in bulk, negotiate global contracts, and optimize factories to run continuously. Every variable is measured: cost per calorie, packaging efficiency, transport density. Nutrition does not disappear, but it becomes secondary. Marketing completes the circuit. Ultra-processed foods are not just cheap to make. They are cheap to promote. Long shelf life allows national advertising campaigns. Consistent flavor builds brand loyalty. Children are introduced early. Habits form before preferences are conscious. In Mexico, multinational beverage companies expanded aggressively in the 1990s and 2000s, reaching rural areas where refrigeration and clean water were limited. Sugary drinks were shelf-stable, affordable, and widely distributed. Consumption surged. Diabetes followed. The system did not malfunction. It expanded exactly as designed. Retail reinforces the pattern. Supermarkets prioritize products that move quickly and waste little. Fresh produce spoils. Packaged food does not. Shelf space goes to items with the highest turnover and marketing support. In many countries, the cheapest calories are placed at eye level. Healthier options are often smaller, more expensive, and easier to overlook. Time pressure locks everything in place. As urbanization increases, work hours lengthen and commuting expands. In South Korea, average workweeks once exceeded 50 hours. In China's major cities, long shifts and dense schedules reduce time available for cooking. Convenience becomes a necessity, not a luxury. Ready-to-eat meals and delivery platforms thrive. The system adapts to speed, not digestion. Globally, logistics completes the machine. Container shipping, cold chains, and just-in-time inventory allow ingredients to circle the planet. Apples travel across hemispheres. Meat is processed in one country, packaged in another, consumed in a third. Distance increases. Accountability dissolves. When harm emerges, responsibility is fragmented across borders. At no point does the system ask whether this environment supports long-term health. That question has no owner. Farmers optimize yield. Corporations optimize margins. Retailers optimize turnover. Governments optimize price stability. Each actor meets its objective. The outcome is predictable. People often imagine control resting with a handful of executives. In reality, power is distributed across incentives. Even companies that attempt reform face structural limits. Healthier ingredients cost more. They spoil faster. They sell slower. In competitive markets, those differences matter. This is why reform is slow. The machine is not held together by intention, but by alignment. Break one component, and the rest compensates. Remove a subsidy, and production shifts elsewhere. Regulate marketing, and pricing adjusts. The system adapts because it was built to. Across continents, the same architecture appears. Different brands, different cuisines, identical mechanics. Cheap calories flow efficiently from field to factory to shelf. Health outcomes lag behind, invisible until years later. No single decision created this machine. It emerged gradually, reinforced by policy, technology, and demand. And once in motion, it became difficult to stop. Not because anyone wanted harm, but because reversing scale is expensive. What looks like a personal food choice is often the final step of a long industrial process. By the time a product reaches a plate, thousands of economic decisions have already been made. Most of them favor efficiency over resilience. This is the invisible machine. It doesn't force people to eat poorly. It simply makes the opposite path harder, slower, and more expensive. And over time, systems like this don't need enforcement. They normalize themselves. The consequences of this system don't appear everywhere in the same way. They spread along economic lines, healthcare capacity, and time. Different regions absorb the damage differently, but the pattern repeats. In the United States, the impact shows up first in healthcare statistics. Obesity rates climbed steadily from the 1980s onward, then accelerated. Today, more than 4 in 10 adults are obese. Type 2 diabetes affects tens of millions. In many low-income neighborhoods, the cheapest daily calories come from fast food and packaged snacks. Fresh produce exists, but it costs more and expires faster. The result is not hunger, but chronic illness. Hospitals expand. Insurance premiums rise. The food bill looks low. The medical bill does not. In Western Europe, the curve bends but does not disappear. Countries like France and Italy delayed the shift longer through food culture and regulation. Portion sizes remained smaller. Ultra-processed penetration was slower. But over time, the same pressures emerged. As supermarket chains consolidated and convenience foods expanded, diet-related diseases increased. In the United Kingdom, ultra-processed foods now make up more than half of calorie intake. Childhood obesity has become a public policy crisis. The system arrives later, but it arrives. In East Asia, the timeline compresses. Japan and South Korea once had some of the lowest obesity rates in the developed world. Traditional diets emphasized vegetables, fish, and fermented foods. As urban work culture intensified and convenience became essential, packaged meals replaced home cooking. South Korea's obesity rate doubled within a generation. In China, the change was faster. Supermarkets, fast food chains, and delivery platforms expanded alongside urban migration. Diabetes cases surged in cities that had almost none 30 years earlier. The shift happened too quickly to be genetic. It followed infrastructure. In Latin America, the damage carries a different shape. In Mexico, sugary drinks became cheaper and more accessible than clean water in some regions. Soda consumption climbed to among the highest per capita globally. Diabetes became one of the leading causes of death. In Brazil, ultra-processed foods expanded rapidly through aggressive marketing and distribution. Obesity rose even as food exports reached record levels. The region feeds the world. Its own population pays a separate cost. In South Asia, the paradox becomes sharper. In India, childhood undernutrition and adult metabolic disease now coexist. Early life calorie scarcity followed by later life calorie abundance creates fragile health outcomes. Stunting in children weakens metabolic resilience. When cheap calories enter later, the damage multiplies. The food system delivers energy without repairing what early deprivation broke. Across Africa, urbanization introduces the same pressures. Traditional diets based on grains, legumes, and local produce give way to imported packaged foods. Cities expand faster than food infrastructure. Convenience wins by default. Obesity and hypertension rise alongside persistent micronutrient deficiencies. The system does not replace hunger with health. It replaces hunger with imbalance. The environmental costs mirror the health costs. Monoculture farming degrades soil. Heavy fertilizer use contaminates water. Industrial livestock operations concentrate waste. These effects remain distant from consumers but feed back into the system through climate stress and rising input costs. The food system becomes more fragile even as it grows more efficient. Economically, the burden shifts from producers to governments. Healthcare systems absorb the long-term costs of diet-related disease. Lost productivity reduces growth. In some countries, military readiness and workforce participation are quietly affected by declining population health. These outcomes rarely appear in food policy discussions, but they compound over decades. What makes these consequences difficult to confront is their delay. Cheap food delivers immediate benefit. Disease arrives years later. By then, responsibility is diffuse. No single purchase caused the outcome. No single actor controls the chain. The system continues to run while damage accumulates quietly. Across regions, the map looks different on the surface. Different cuisines, different brands, different income levels. Underneath, the mechanics are the same. Cheap calories stabilize markets. Health destabilizes slowly. This is the geography of consequence. Not a single collapse, but a long erosion. It doesn't announce itself with shortages or empty shelves. It shows up in clinics, insurance systems, and shortened healthy lifespans. The system keeps feeding people. It just feeds them in a way that makes the bill arrive later. They grew up during abundance. That's the detail that matters. In the early 1990s, a generation was born into a world where food scarcity was no longer the dominant fear. Supermarkets expanded. Convenience stores multiplied. Packaged food became normal. This generation did not experience hunger the way their grandparents did. They experienced choice, or what looked like choice. In northern Mexico, public health records show a clear break in the timeline. Adults born before the 1970s largely avoided diabetes until later life. Those born after the mid-1980s began developing it in their 30s, sometimes earlier. The shift did not align with genetics. It aligned with the arrival of cheap sugary drinks and packaged snacks in schools, workplaces, and small neighborhood stores. By the time the pattern became visible, it was already widespread. In the United States, the same curve appears across income levels. Children born in the 1990s consumed more calories than previous generations, but fewer nutrients. School lunches relied increasingly on processed ingredients designed for cost efficiency and shelf stability. By adolescence, obesity rates climbed sharply. By adulthood, chronic disease followed. Today, many in their early 40s manage blood sugar, blood pressure, and cholesterol simultaneously. Not after decades of excess. After ordinary lives. In urban China, the transformation happened faster. In the late 1980s, daily meals were still cooked at home. By the early 2000s, supermarkets and fast food chains had become common. Delivery apps followed. Within a single generation, obesity and type 2 diabetes rose from near absence to national concern. Hospitals expanded endocrinology departments. The average age of diagnosis dropped. What took half a century in the West unfolded in less than 20 years. South Korea offers another version of the same story. Long work hours compressed daily routines. Home cooking declined. Convenience store meals became standard for millions of workers living alone in cities. These meals were reliable, affordable, and calorie-dense. Between the 1990s and the 2010s, obesity rates doubled. Health surveys show rising metabolic risk even among people who do not appear overweight. The damage is internal before it is visible. In the United Kingdom, public health agencies began tracking childhood obesity closely in the early 2000s. The data showed concentration. The highest rates appeared in neighborhoods with limited access to fresh food and high exposure to ultra-processed products. Parents did not lack awareness. They lacked time, money, and alternatives that fit daily life. By the time children reached adulthood, habits were fixed. Interventions arrived late. Across these places, the pattern converges. A generation exposed early to cheap calories, frequent eating, and constant availability enters adulthood metabolically unprepared. Their bodies were shaped by an environment that removed natural constraints. Meals no longer followed hunger. They followed schedules, stress, and convenience. The consequences are measurable. In many countries, the average age of first diagnosis for type 2 diabetes has dropped by more than a decade compared to previous generations. Complications once associated with old age now appear in midlife. Kidney disease, cardiovascular events, and vision loss emerge earlier, extending the duration of medical dependence. Healthcare systems absorb the shock. In the United States, the lifetime medical cost of a person diagnosed with diabetes in their 40s can exceed hundreds of thousands of dollars. Multiply that across millions of cases, and the burden shifts from individual tragedy to systemic strain. Insurance premiums rise. Public budgets tighten. Employers lose productivity. The food bill remains low. The real bill accumulates quietly. What makes this a climax is not a single event, but inevitability. By the time disease appears, the environment that produced it has already done its work. Telling people to change behavior after decades of exposure has limited effect. The system trained routines early and reinforced them daily. This generation did not rebel against tradition. Tradition disappeared around them. Meals changed shape. Portions grew. Snacking became constant. Liquids delivered calories without satiety. Marketing framed these changes as normal. By the time warnings arrived, the baseline had shifted. In public discourse, responsibility often circles individuals. Eat less. Move more. Choose better. But these messages collide with lived reality. In cities where workdays are long and commutes consume hours, cooking competes with exhaustion. In neighborhoods where packaged food dominates shelves, choice narrows. The system sets defaults. People follow them. Across continents, different languages describe the same condition. Lifestyle disease, non-communicable disease, metabolic syndrome. The names change. The pattern does not. A generation fed efficiently but poorly begins to age earlier than expected. This is the human cost of optimization. Calories were made cheap to eliminate hunger and stabilize markets. That goal was achieved. What followed was not planned, but it was predictable. When abundance removes friction, consumption accelerates. When consumption accelerates, biology responds. The climax is not a collapse. It is a realization. A generation discovers that the environment it trusted was never designed for long-term health. It was designed for scale. The consequences arrive quietly, one prescription at a time, long after the choices that led there feel distant. No single meal caused this. No single company engineered it. It emerged from repetition, day after day, year after year, across borders, across cultures. The system did not fail these people. It treated them exactly as expected inputs. And by the time the cost becomes undeniable, the machine has already moved on, feeding the next generation the same way. The collapse does not arrive with empty shelves or food shortages. It arrives quietly, through systems that were never designed to carry this weight. Healthcare systems feel it first. Chronic disease does not spike once. It accumulates. Diabetes, cardiovascular disease, kidney failure, and metabolic disorders require lifelong management. In many high-income countries, treatment begins decades earlier than it did for previous generations. Hospitals expand not for emergencies, but for maintenance. Clinics fill with patients who are not acutely ill, but never fully healthy. In the United States, healthcare spending continues to climb faster than economic growth. Managing diet-related disease consumes an increasing share of public and private budgets. The cost is not limited to treatment. Lost productivity compounds it. Workers miss days. Careers shorten. Disability rises quietly in midlife. The economy absorbs fewer healthy years from each individual. Europe experiences a slower version of the same pressure. Universal healthcare systems distribute costs broadly, masking individual financial pain while amplifying national strain. As populations age with higher disease burdens, funding gaps widen. Governments face trade-offs between prevention, treatment, and other public services. The food system keeps prices low. Healthcare systems adjust upward. In East Asia, demographic decline intersects with metabolic disease. Countries like Japan and South Korea already face shrinking workforces. Rising chronic illness reduces labor participation further. In China, where economic growth relied on large, healthy urban populations, the surge in diabetes and cardiovascular disease places long-term constraints on productivity. These effects do not show up in quarterly reports. They appear over decades. In low and middle-income countries, the collapse takes a harsher form. Healthcare infrastructure is thinner. Treatment arrives late or not at all. Diet-related disease compounds existing inequalities. People live longer than before, but with fewer healthy years. Families absorb care responsibilities. Informal economies slow. The cost shifts downward, from institutions to households. Life expectancy tells part of the story. In some high-income countries, gains have stalled or reversed, especially among lower-income populations. Not because medicine failed, but because disease patterns changed. Infectious disease receded. Chronic disease took its place. The food environment became a silent risk factor, present daily and difficult to escape. The collapse extends beyond health. Education systems feel it as children struggle with concentration, energy regulation, and long-term health complications. Military readiness declines quietly as fewer young adults meet physical requirements. Insurance systems recalibrate risk pools. Employers adjust expectations. None of these changes dominate headlines. Together, they reshape societies. Environmental feedback loops deepen the damage. Monoculture farming depletes soil. Heavy fertilizer use contaminates water. Industrial livestock concentrates waste. Climate stress increases volatility in food production. As inputs become more expensive, producers double down on efficiency. Processing intensifies. Cheap calories remain the priority. Nutritional resilience remains secondary. What makes this collapse difficult to confront is its invisibility. There is no single moment of failure, no event to point to. The system continues to feed billions every day. Shelves remain stocked. Prices stay relatively stable. From a distance, it looks like success. The costs appear elsewhere. In hospital budgets. In shortened healthy lifespans. In families managing illness for decades. In public finance spreadsheets adjusted year after year. The food system does not record these losses. They fall outside its accounting. Responsibility dissolves as the consequences spread. Farmers grow what pays. Companies sell what moves. Consumers buy what fits their time and budget. Governments prioritize stability. Each decision is rational in isolation. Together, they produce outcomes no single actor intended but all participate in. Attempts at correction encounter friction. Healthier food costs more to produce and distribute. It spoils faster. It generates waste. Structural change threatens margins, subsidies, and political support. Incremental reform struggles against scale. The system adapts around interventions rather than reversing course. The collapse is not a breakdown of supply. It is a breakdown of alignment between what the system delivers and what human bodies require over time. Calories remain abundant. Health becomes scarce. This imbalance persists because it does not trigger immediate crisis. Hunger provokes action. Chronic disease accumulates quietly. By the time consequences are undeniable, generations have already been shaped by the environment. What remains after the collapse is normalization. A society adjusts expectations downward. Illness in midlife becomes common. Medication becomes routine. Prevention becomes individualized. The system reframes adaptation as responsibility. Food continues to be cheap. The real cost settles into institutions and lives, spread thin enough to avoid revolt, heavy enough to limit futures. This is not the end of the food system. It is its long shadow. The shelves stay full. The system keeps running. What erodes is something harder to measure. The number of years people live without managing decline. The shelves are still full. Supermarkets stay open late. Delivery apps keep running. Food remains cheap, predictable, and everywhere. From the outside, nothing looks broken. There are no shortages, no ration cards, no visible collapse. The system did what it was asked to do. It made calories abundant. It stabilized prices. It removed hunger as a daily fear for billions of people. By every short-term economic measure, it succeeded. What it did not measure was time. Health does not fail all at once. It erodes. Quietly. One routine at a time. One meal repeated thousands of times. The cost does not appear on the receipt. It appears years later, in clinics, in medication schedules, in bodies that age faster than expected. This was never a story about bad choices. Most people ate what was available, affordable, and compatible with their lives. They adapted to the environment they were given. The environment adapted to efficiency, not biology. No single decision caused this outcome. No single actor controls it. The food system evolved through alignment. Policy favored stability. Markets favored scale. Time favored convenience. Together, they shaped a world where eating enough became easy, and staying healthy became conditional. The contradiction remains unresolved. Calories continue to get cheaper. The systems that manage illness grow larger. Society absorbs the difference and calls it normal. The machine does not stop. It does not need to. It feeds the next generation the same way. Faster, more refined, more efficient. And as long as shelves stay full, the question lingers quietly beneath the noise of abundance. Not whether we have enough food, but what kind of future the system is actually feeding.